Good morning. My name is Ben Holquist. I'm on your board of trustees, sorry. I'm happy to welcome you to the Tahoma Unitarian Universalist congregation. Longtime members and new visitors like you are welcome here. We are one people of many faiths, spiritualities, sexualities, and everyone, and love is the power that brings us together here. If this is your first time with us, I bring you a special welcome. I'm so glad you found your way to our community. I will be in the back over there at the end of the service. If you have any questions about Tahoma UU or about UU in general, or how you get more involved in this congregation. For those of you here in the sanctuary, we have hearing assistance devices and large print hymnals at the back on, I believe, the right-hand side. Our ushers would be happy to help you with those. For those online, the online chat chaplain will help with any online questions. You can find information on our website, tahomauu.com. Please be sure to read the weekly e-news, which you can sign up for on our website, tahomauu.com. And they will provide information about our congregation, upcoming events, and volunteer opportunities. If you haven't yet signed up for the e-news, please do think about doing so. There is so much happening. The only thing I'm going to mention today, because I think our e-news is pretty comprehensive right now, is that I am looking for a couple or three volunteers to help with getting the Health and Safety Committee up and running again. As I pointed out last time I did this, the fire exit maps appear to have been built before the remodel of the building. So we should probably change those. And there's a couple other things that we need to work on to get our policies up and running for the modern era. And again, the e-news has got a lot more detail about everything. You are invited to join us for social hour immediately after the service. Refreshments will be over there. It's a great time to catch up and get to know new people. If you are new and would like people to approach you to talk, we have red mugs. The red mug is telling us that it's our responsibility to talk to you, not your responsibility to introduce yourself to everyone in the church. If you would like to not be approached by people, you can just take a normal white mug and we will only talk to you as much as we normally talk to each other. As we begin our service, I respectfully acknowledge that I speak to you today from the land of the Coast Salish people, including the Puyallup tribal nation, land from which they were forcibly displaced. I affirm the continued sovereignty of the 574 federally recognized tribes, including the 29 here in Washington, and support those still fighting for federal recognition. I acknowledge the theft, violence, trauma, and racism that Indigenous people have experienced at the hands of colonizers from 1492 through the present day. I honor the resiliency and the Indigenous people and stand with them as they continue their fight for land, water, visibility, sovereignty, and their very existence. Lastly, friends, I invite you to set your electronic devices into worship mode. We are gathered here, one community together. Let us settle ourselves into this holy moment and open our hearts to learn and unlearn, to share and to receive. Now let us join together in worship.
Hello, I am the Reverend Margo Rinehart. I am the minister here since October. I know the exact date. It was October 7th. I know because I was so excited to arrive. Our first reading of the day is from Sandra Fees. She calls it a shared story. For the stories that long to be told and retold, for the stories that long to be imagined and reimagined, for the stories that long to be envisioned and celebrated, we bask in this light, that light. Lights of different truths, of different paths, of different voices, all needed to cultivate a transformative story. Not just any story, but a story of justice, love, and beauty. We will now join in our opening hymn, and Patty McPhee will lead us. Hymn. Oh, Chalice. I'm sorry.
Sorry. All right, I would like to invite for our chalice, I'd like to invite Karna up to light the chalice and Charles. Charles wasn't sure if he was going to join. Well. You'll join me in reading our opening word, or our chalice lighting word. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. And now, if you would rise in body or spirit, for hymn 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. It is. So I'd like to invite those young and young at heart to join me in the front for a story. I know. You're so good. You know the routine. All right, there we go. All right. I see lots of familiar friends and lots of new friends too. Oh, thank you. Oh, look, Thomas is going to be my microphone holder so I can hold the book. We get by with a little help from our friends. So, I have a story today for you. And this comes from the Jewish tradition, which is one of our sources. And it's called Joseph Had a Little Overcoat by Sims Tabak. I know. Do you know what an overcoat is? I think you're about to find out. It does. And that is the end of our story. He made a story out of it. And it became this book. All right, let's rise and sing the children out. Thank you so much. Pat Chaplin is going to lead us in the offertory.
There we go. Had to get my sound
right.
on. So those of you in the sanctuary can put your donations in the basket. And if you're online, or even if you're in the sanctuary and you want to be online, go to our website there on the screen and click on the Give button. And then there are directions. It will walk you through how to donate to TUUC. And we thank you for your generosity.
Okay. And if you'll join with me in our words of dedication. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls. All right, and then if you will rise in body or spirit for hymn number 22, Dear Weaver of our Lives Design.
Okay, well, apparently to read the order of service, I not only need to put on my glasses, I need to have cleaned them, which I have now done. So I have one very short piece to read and then something longer. The short one is from Joan Didion about her autographical play about mourning the death of her husband and her daughter. And she says, the idea that whoever appeared on stage would play not just me, but a character central to imagining how to make the narrative. I would need to see myself from the outside. I would need to locate the dissonance between the person I thought I was and the person other people saw. Leave it to Joan Didion to take our breath away, right? And this one is from Unitarian Universalist minister Rod Richards, who is a fairly prolific writer of kind of short pieces. And he says, I remember being in a writer's group way back when the piece was up for discussion was my particular short story that I had written. On one of the first questions to me was, did that really happen? How much of this is really true? And before I could answer, my friend sitting next to me, a writer with a newly published novel, threw out his arm in front of me, pushing me and said, don't answer that. It's completely irrelevant. The story is either true or it's not. It doesn't matter if it happened. Richards goes on to say, it's either true or not. It doesn't matter if it happened. Stories, art, poetry, music, and the free reign of creative imagination can provide truths in a unique and engaging way. The details of what happened in the piece might be made up. The underlying awareness may really be the point to something irrefutably real in our lives. In that sense, fiction, understood as fiction, can be true. And nonfiction, yes, can be a lie, even when it apparently tells what happened. He goes on in that piece to reference the nonfiction between the police reports about the George Floyd murder and the accounts of the eyewitnesses. So I wrote this sermon a couple weeks ago. I practiced it several times. And then this morning, as I was puttering around and looking at what happened here yesterday, I was like, wow, I'm going to need to rewrite that on the fly in the middle of the sermon. So I'm going to tell you when I get there. At first, you're going to get the part I've rehearsed and done several weeks ago. So before I was a Unitarian Universalist minister, I spent over 20 years as a social worker. I primarily worked with families, and these were families either in crisis or profound change. And the interviewing I did was to gather certain information to conduct an assessment that normally went back to family court. I was identifying what did and did not work well in the family's functioning. And I did this not by asking them what's working well and what's not, but getting them to tell stories. So I had some prompt questions because I was looking for the certain kinds of stories. And what I was doing is what Joan Didion was saying. I was comparing the narrative to what they were telling about themselves and what I was seeing. And the more stress and crisis and poor functioning in the family, the further apart those were. So many of them just could not see the depth of what was going on in poor functioning, partially because it was too painful for them to see, and partially because they'd grown up with a lot of challenges and they didn't actually have the best thing to compare it to. Sometimes there were mental health issues, but often these were just folks overwhelmed, or maybe they didn't have as many problem-solving skills as they would like to have. And my job was to get them to rewrite their story. What do you want to be going forward? Yes, we've talked about these hard times. We've talked about things you label as mistakes, but let's start writing your story forward from here. And that second element is the adaptive one. How often do we say this to ourselves or we hear it from other people? Something happens and we're recounting it later, or someone's recounting it to us and said, oh, what I should have done or what I should have said was X, Y, or Z, right? So if we could stay, instead of smacking ourselves on the forehead, let's see that as a rehearsal for the next time that comes around. I didn't do or say what I wanted to in this moment, but if I get a chance at this again, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it differently. So I've been walking around with the last few weeks with a really serious ankle sprain. I have tears in there. You've seen me in a walking boot. You're seeing me in my blue jeans and my hiking boots this morning because I can't wear normal shoes. So I first sprained this ankle. I sprained it twice, running through the airport, through baggage claim to get to my shuttle. So I could have avoided this whole mess if I just said, wow, I'm never going to make that shuttle. Maybe I should just grab a cup of tea and crack open my book and sit down here for the next hour. So I've rewritten that story because I'm going to be in an airport at least 3 more times. It's like, okay, you can't make that shuttle. Are we going to run? No. We're going to get that cup of tea. We're going to crack open that book that you didn't finish on the plane. And we're going to say, oh, well, it's another hour out of my life. So this morning, I want to focus on how we rewrite stories and why it's important. I have a little social science research in here, and then I'm going to just go off script, and then we're all going to come back. So know that our brains are designed to construct narratives. It's how the brain streamlines remembering things. We don't just remember a bunch of random weird facts. We remember them as experiences and stories. People remember facts more accurately in a story than on a bullet point list. And we remember, so it's not only that we remember more accurately as well. And the same thing about legal arguments. You are more likely to understand and remember the tenet of the argument if it comes in a story. So here's the nerdy social science. Researcher Dan McAdams, who I think has written a brilliant book called The Redemptive Self, and he's all about this retelling your story. And redeeming you out of past behavior you don't want to repeat into something new. So he has research, and we often pick on college students in research because they're so available, right? They're right there on the campus. Come on in, get $100. And if you show up for the follow-up, we'll give you another 100. So he has them come in and talk about high points and low points in their lives so far. So, and then follow them over a few years. So people who were having anxiety or depression, they might tell a positive story, but they would add on a really difficult thing at the end of the story. So they're kind of stuck there in the difficulty. Where he noticed that the students that were doing better in college and weren't reporting depressive symptoms, they might describe something difficult, but they would say, yeah, this thing happened, but I found a good counselor, or I found a 12-step group, or I found this, and I moved my way out. So they were rewriting their story. Some of them even described really difficult things, separations, divorces, personal crises in their lives. And they would say, even about difficult relationships breaking up, they'd say, yeah, but there was epiphanies in there. I went on to meet this other great person, or I went on to do this thing that I wouldn't have done otherwise. It was like, and this is why the book is called Redemption. These are second chances. And that these stories drive people's behavior, and that we carry both conscious and unconscious stories. And it's the unconscious story that's really going to get you in trouble. Should I marry this person or move in with this person? Should I take a volunteer job or a paid job? Should I move across the country to be with my adult children? So another researcher says, we all, what's his name? Timothy Wilson, who also wrote a book. We all have personal stories about who we are and what the world is like. And these stories aren't necessarily conscious, but they are the narratives by which we live our lives. Many of us have healthy, optimistic stories that serve us well. But sometimes people develop pessimistic stories and get caught in that self-defeating thinking over and over. They assume the worst, and they often, as a result, cope poorly because they've narrowed down their options. And he says, this is why we need to rewrite our negative stories. So we expand our options. So we set up a study in which people were prompted by giving information. Again, this was college students, but so these were college students not doing well academically. And so we split them into two groups. And this is always the tragedy with research. The control group gets no intervention, right? So they just keep struggling. I hope they got intervention at the end after the study was over. I'm like, hey. And these were at-risk students of dropping out. And so the group that got the intervention were talked to by other students, upperclassmen, so juniors and seniors, who said, I felt like that. I was in that place. I was at risk of dropping out. These are the things I did. This is what I learned about myself. The other group didn't get that. So then when they go back the next year to look at these two groups of students, guess what? Group one stayed in school and brought their grades up. And group two continued to struggle and had a much higher rate of dropping out. And again, I say, I hope they followed up with that other group and gave them the same intervention and said, come on back. So that can be applied to a new job, a volunteer opportunity, big decisions you're working on. don't adopt a story that says, I'm not cut out for this. Instead, adapt a story that says, I really believe in this work and I think I can do it. I think I can be good at it, but I have a lot to learn. So I need to figure out what are the questions I want to ask and who are the people I can ask my questions of. I know that we are about ready to head into a lot of social justice work this year. And we have somebody in our congregation who is wanting to lead us in that, who's currently out of town, so I'm not going to rat her out yet. So we will be asking ourselves these questions, not, we can't do this, it's too hard. What do we need to do right now for our justice work? How can we be effective? Who are the people who can educate us about this? And then follow the advice they give us. So we will be engaging in that over the next 6 months. And once you work on this, it not only helps you in the environment you're in, it starts to translate to other environments. One of my stories that I carried around for a really long time was changed in the past couple of years. My mother always told me I had no artistic talent. And I'll bet a bunch of you have been told that here and there, or you have no musical talent, or you can't sing, whatever. My mother always told me I had no artistic talent based on 2 art classes she had enrolled me in. And I have to say, yeah, those weren't my thing. But so that reality that I created caused me a lot of sadness, and it really caused me a lot of envy. And I'm not always nice when I'm envious, right? It also caused me to avoid opportunities to develop creative artistic channels because I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of other people. It's like, I'm not even good at this. Why am I still trying to do it? Nor did I think practice would make a difference. But finally, I realized I'm really good with color, and people told me that a lot. I knew what to put together. I knew what not to put together. I knew weird combinations that were kind of edgy, but they pulled in a lot of visual interest. You should have seen the lime green wall in my house. So there's the researcher Wilson says, crack open the door. If it's too scary to go all the way into something, just crack open the door. So that playing with color was cracking open that door from I am not an artistic person or a creative into, well, maybe I'm good at this little part. So it was in my 50s that I started talking to my immediate family about how I wanted to keep playing with color by taking a painting class, and I wanted to do watercolor. But not thinking I would create a painting, that wasn't it. I was just going to play with the colors. 2 years went by and I did nothing. And then Mother's Day rolled around, and my son, who loves to just presented me with watercolor paints, paper, and brushes. And it's Mother's Day, right? So if I didn't use them, it would be insulting his gift, right? He had really thought about this. He looked like the cat that ate the canary. And he said, now you don't have an excuse anymore for not painting. I love that kid. I hope to get him up here in the pulpit someday. So I ended up in so lonely living in another state. I was so lonely. I pined to come home, and I thought maybe I could find a painting group. Maybe I just got to do it. And by a bunch of weird twists of events, I got invited to a painting group that had real artists in it, like artists who sell their work. And I was terrified, of course. I painted with them. They gave me lots of feedback, and I was diligent. I painted every one night a week at home and every Friday morning with them. And people would come by. We're painting in a very open space. It's in a food co-op. We're upstairs with a coffee shop, and people would come by all the time and look at the artist's work, which was quite spectacular. And I would hide mine. I'd be like, no, I'm just a beginner. They're the real people. And finally, one day after I'd been painting with them for a year, this artist ripped my picture right out of my hands, held it up to everyone standing there and looked over at me and said, stop that. Just stop that. You are an intermediate painter. You are not a beginner, and you need to stand up and own it. Oh! And so I did. And what I found out was all of a sudden it was transferring to other things. My writing got more creative. My furniture arranging got more creative. The sad part of that story is I wasn't able to provide that affirmation for myself, right? It took an outside intervention and it took decades. However, I'd opened that door with that little crack. And I got rid of that sense of worthlessness that went with not being a creative. And I will tell you, I'm living the life. I'm a creative. I'm an artist. And I get life gets a lot more joyful when you believe you're good at something. Okay, now here's when I'm going off script. I started thinking yesterday, there was a group of us. We are having a new director of children's religious exploration come. She's almost here. The kids are making her a tissue paper bouquet of flowers this morning for her new office. I would like you guys to take a little tour down here. You got to go out through the hall. That's the end office on the left, and just see that office, see its potential. So it was mostly board members here yesterday. There were a few other people. So we were cleaning out that office. We were also cleaning in here. We were rearranging chairs. We were emphasizing different colors. And I'm smiling at Patty because she was our consultant. And I thought about the story that this congregation has had over the last 6 months, or probably 12 months. If you are a newer person here, you didn't experience all of this. But there was a time last July, August, September, you had no minister, you had no administrator, and you had no director of children's education. So what was that story? That story was the volunteers are working their butts off to keep this place going. Things that you would like to have you didn't have, like a social justice team. Volunteers who are keeping that office going and the admin. I cannot tell you how hard that must have been, and yet probably also rewarding. It's like, hey, I'm doing this for the love of the congregation. But that was the story. And when I interviewed here, what I heard in that interview process over and over and over is we're looking for stability, because once we can get stable, then we can have all these other things come back. Right? So the story was we're looking for stability. Well, guess what? You have arrived. You have arrived. You have stability. You have a fabulous administrator. You have a really solid board. Your minister is darn excited to be with you and not going anywhere anytime soon. So as we were doing this yesterday, Dave, I love you. You're going to make me cry. The story we were writing is that this is a beautiful dwelling, that this is where a community comes together with their hopes and dreams. This is where a community comes together to support one another. This is where we've all come in at one time or another because we needed some sort of personal sanctuary. And now we've got a social justice team forming. You know, we have an NA group here that meets here. This is new. We have without digressing too far into this, our finances are, the way we report our finances is completely redone with more transparency, more clarity, more of us working on this flowing system. Getting pledges all together is now in a different kind of flowing system. I don't want to say that there was anything wrong with the money before, but I want to say it's just easier to track it now. It's easier for us to just go in and peek and see that everything is working right at all times. And the other rewrite on the story is we are going to go forward with financial stability. We're going to go forward with enough volunteers. We're going to be a force in the community, and we have a lot of work to do, and we're going to get it done one piece at a time. So that's our rewrite. Did I miss anything? Like, seriously, shout it out. Just shout it out. Yeah, our story is you are resilient. Yeah. Because when I say things were hard, last summer and fall, it wasn't like the congregation was going to fall apart, but it was just so hard on everybody who was trying to pull it together. And I heard how much you were missing your programming. So you are resilient. Okay. There are a lot more stories. So I want you to leave here today thinking about storytelling on 2 levels, or maybe even 3, but about how those personal stories can be retold to write a different future, and about how the stories about our congregation going forward can also be rewritten, which doesn't mean we throw out what happened before. It's just that we get focused on what we want to do in the next year and 2 years and 5 years. We started some of that with the sticky notes over there, but we're thinking even bigger. We're thinking leadership, we're thinking stewardship, we're thinking money, because as you know, there will be a pledge drive. So I'm just going to wrap this all up by saying, let's write stories about ourselves that are true. And I'm going to leave you with the words of fiction writer Terry Pratchett. Is it really fiction that he wrote? I don't think so. I was watching a great Star Trek Voyager episode last night where the holographic doctor had written all these stories about the crew that were quite derogatory. And he said, "Oh, it's just fiction." And someone said, "No, there's no such thing as fiction. You're always writing from your own experience." So that was my thought about Pratchett. His advice to us is, there's always a story. It's all stories, really. The sun coming up every day is a story. Everything's got a story in it. Change the story and change the world. All right. I'm going to pass by our formal intention seeking because I want you to play with this all week long.
All right, and if you will rise in body or spirit for our closing hymn, 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life in the Dark Hymnal.
So for all of you who know, I work in 2 different congregations, and it's one of my dilemmas that I have is one congregation does things this way and the other. Our closing words are from the Reverend Sherry Woodbury. May we have the courage to speak or write the stories within us that need to be told, the stories that make up our lives. May we listen with a loving mind and heart to the stories in others' lives, others here in this congregation, and others in our wider community world. Let us choose with care the stories that we teach our children, remembering that all our stories have power and that all of our stories are connected. And for all of life is one. In the name of all that is sacred in these gathered hearts, may it be so.
All right. And if you will join with me in our extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. All right, and if you will join with me in our closing blessing song.
Be aware that the art will be changing in the next 2 weeks. If you're interested in buying any of the artwork, please notify me.